have to miss it. I
Yes.
have to miss it. I'll let you know, but I'm
Okay.
pretty sure.
And, you know, if you have to, then you know that there's a recording, so it'll help you out.
Right.
And we'll give it about one more minute on Carol, see if she gets in here. Everybody got your handouts, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh. I may be putting you on mute if my dogs bark. Yeah. Oh, that's what he's got. Oh, get away from that. Get away from that. Get away. Sit. I still have my Christmas tree up. I'm not letting it go yet. It's so beautiful.
Oh.
And for the first time, it's actually going tonight. But for the first time, the dogs decided to find it. So they're eating the leaves off, which is not good. Little pines. Yeah. Good boy.
Now, we gave up on that years ago because of the cat. So.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, the cats. They'll climb right through the middle of it, right? I mean,
Yeah, too much exploration for them.
yeah. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. I'm going to see if Carol is maybe desperate out there for me to answer her. And doesn't look like she is, so we're going to go ahead and begin.
Right.
Okay, well, welcome, and I'm so glad to see you all now and see you again. So this is fun. You know, I'm started these onlines in 2020 in March, and I can't believe it's going to, you know, we're going to roll right over into our third year of this thing. But I love it because I can see Lynette from out on the prairie, and I can see Suzanne from on the far side of town, and I can see Carol. Carol, you're still up in College Station, right?
I am.
Yeah. And then Marie, I can see you from New York. So, you know, I love this. This
Right.
is just absolutely fabulous. So for me, it's a really good thing. And so welcome to the masterclass. What masterclass is, we'll meet for 4 sessions. It's a bit more advanced because I'm assuming that you all are ready for more advanced information. It's also a time when we're going to do homework, and I'm going to give you assignments, and then you're going to present your work. And there is nothing like seeing or getting inspiration and getting stimulus when you see what somebody else does with the same material. And so that to me is just the beauty of the master classes. So with flower photography, and does anybody have any questions before I get started?
No.
Nope, y'all good? Okay, now you've all been with me before, you all know me, so interrupt anytime. And I have this set so that whoever says anything, the microphone goes to them. And so, you know, you're free to talk, okay? So with flower photography, I think that we need to be looking in the viewfinder, either whether we're looking on the back or we're looking through the viewfinder, or whatever we're doing. And we need to be asking ourselves, what are we trying to say? What are we trying to communicate? I'm an editorial photographer as opposed to a fine art photographer. And so I'm constantly trying to see whether I'm communicating something to my audience or not. And so I encourage you, when you're looking through the viewfinder, to think about with any type of photography, what are we trying to communicate? What are we trying to convey? Now, with flowers and humans, we obviously have this massive love for flowers, but flowers have been appearing in our art all the way back to the beginning of time. So you see here this I got to move my screen out of the way there, move you all out of the way. There we go. You can see on this shot, for instance, the screen captures. So we've got this Chinese screen painting going back to 1295. And then in the Persian world, where, you know, they saved our algebra and our geometry, we've got this garden, and then we've got the floral motif going all the way around the edges of it. So since we've been creating art, we've been including flowers in that art. A lot of our religious art also includes flowers, and you probably never really thought about it that much. But once you start looking at a lot of the early Renaissance art, then you'll see that there's a lot of flowers included in that art, going from Da Vinci, where Da Vinci was studying the interior structures of flowers and how flowers looked. So, you know, the whole interior surface of it and moving it around from angle to angle and looking at how it looked. And then to my favorite Durer, doing really, really detailed botanical prints, where we can see all of the structures, and when we start naming different plants and we start giving them common names, and we start in that age of discovery when we start looking at what we have around the world with us. And then continuing into the age of discovery, when the ships started sailing off and going to the New World and coming back from around into Asia, we start seeing these beautiful botanical prints where we're putting in this case figs in with some beautiful long-tailed birds, this one coming from the 1590s. And we're used to looking at this. We're used to seeing this as part of our art in Western civilization. And then as we start getting a little bit more advanced, we start coming into the age of realism with our art. And this one, I think, is just an absolutely gorgeous picture from 1607. And if you look at it, it's almost like we're looking at a photograph, because we've come to the point in painting where we can duplicate what now we do in photography. So just absolutely beautiful detail and you know, wonderful presentation of the flowers around us. Notice the color palette too. We've got a red, white, and blue color palette with just a hint of yellow and orange to pull everything out. So when we start talking about the color wheel and we start talking about color harmony, this is the type thing that we're looking at. And then this is one of my favorite artists. Now, this is a female artist, Giovanna, and she's coming out of Florence in the 1640s. And she was a prolific artist in botanical prints. So in these type of still lifes, but look at the windows reflecting on her vases. You see those window reflections down there? Those to me almost look like a photograph. And the way also that she has illustrated how the water in the vase makes the stems a slight bit larger than they are in real life. So you're seeing this you know, mistress of artistry going on. And she's devoting herself to the flowers of the Florence region. And then here's one from your neck of the woods, Lynette, in the 1877s. This is a famous Filipino artist who also included the backgrounds of the gardens and the life that we would see around our subjects. So in anything, in so many things of what humans have done, we have such a connection with that natural world and such a connection with those flowers that we bring them into our art. And then going to Van Gogh in 1888, when he did his famous sunflowers, which, you know, when we think of sunflowers and art today, we think of Van Gogh's sunflowers. And he was so mesmerized by them that he did masses of amounts of them and a lot of series of them. And here you notice once again, the color palette, we're dealing with those blues and those oranges and those yellows. So we're dealing with that color palette that is so harmonious and makes us really want to stay in the picture and look at it. keep going. There we go. And then another of his sunflowers. And so we move into the Impressionist era. And then once photography starts really coming into its own, then photographers are also looking at flowers and taking flowers and doing things with flowers in our photography. And we then today take something like this. I remember this Spathiphyllum from when I was a young photographer, and then, or excuse me, calla lily. And then as I encountered the calla lilies in Costa Rica, then those images come back from my head of like, oh, wow, that's those flowers. They grow like hedges in Costa Rica, where in here we pay $5 a stem for them or $4 a stem for them because they're so attractive and so beautiful. So we've got a huge history of photographing or working with flowers and putting flowers into our art. And so that's where we're going with all of this, is pulling those floral subjects into your artwork. So going back to the basics of photography, just so we're kind of clear on everything, then your aperture setting blurs your background. So your f-stop controls how much of your background we see in clear focus and how much we don't see in clear focus. Your f-stop controls that. Also, how far away you are from your subject. So the closer you are, the more you're going to be able to blur out the background. And then the further the background is, the more you're going to be able to blur out the background. So working with that depth of field with our photography, and then making sure that with that aperture, we're putting our subject that we want in focus, even if we're shooting through other subjects like the bluebonnets in the foreground and the bluebonnets in the background out of focus, but then the one right in the middle being in focus. So we can blow the foreground out as well as the background out with our aperture. And then making sure that when we want to show people the entire scene, like the whole garden, we're using that f/22 or that f/32 so that we can see the entire scene when we're trying to illustrate that to our audience. And then it's important also that we think about where we are focusing. Remember that there's only one area in a photograph that the camera focuses on. Everything, a lot of stuff might be in focus because of the plane of the depth of field. But if we let the camera just arbitrarily focus and we accept that, then it might be that where we really wanted to focus, so say for instance, the water drop is not in focus. And so we've got to be able to move those focus points around, touch the screen on the back so that we get the focus point exactly where we want it if you're using the mirrorless cameras. But think very much about where your focus point is. The area in focus is where the eye goes to first. So the eye goes to what's in focus first and then explores around. So think about where your entry point is for the eye. Where do you want the human to come in and look at your picture? Where do you want the starting point to be? And you see there's several water drops on this rose that are in focus, but I'm choosing, I'd like this to be the kind of peak of the focus point. This is where I'd like it to be. And then hopefully the viewer's eye is going to stay around in that area. So think about where your focus point is in your photograph. Think about where your focus point is in your photograph. So here it's a little further back into the bluebonnet field. You know that there's a tree back there. You know that there's horses back there, but it's a little further back into the bluebonnet field. But then we've got the same photograph where the focus point comes forward. So we've still got the same blurred background, but now we're bringing the eye into the foreground of the photograph. So it's where you're putting your viewer's eye based on where you put your focus point. Questions on focus point? Nope. And I know all of you all know how to move it around. 'Cause I've taught you all how to do that over the years. So I know you all know how to do that. Okay,
Kathy?
Yeah.
Kathy, I do have a question.
sure.
Should we ever go off a single focus point?
Yeah, I shoot off of a single focus point a lot because even if you're using a cluster, the camera is only focusing on one spot.
Ah, okay.
I mean, it
I
only
didn't realize-
focuses in one place. It can't focus in 5 places. That's not the way it
Right.
works. So the cluster just kind of widens out what your opportunities are. You're shooting with a shotgun as opposed to
Gotcha.
shooting with a you know, a real fine-tuned pistol, for instance. So, you know, I shoot with one focus point a lot, or I check to see where the camera is focusing and decide whether that's what I want or not. And then I'll
Gotcha.
change it. So sometimes, like when I'm doing birds, I'll shoot on sometimes a larger cluster. But then if it's not getting where I want it to go, then I'll change that to a single point and then move the single point where I need it to be.
So if you were doing a bird and you wanted the whole bird in focus, it wouldn't be through so much matter whether you're doing a single or a wide focal point. You just want to do the f-stop high. In that case,
I want to do the f-stop appropriate for the subject.
right?
But then
Right.
with a bird, for instance, I want to focus on the eye. So I would set it to eye focus, for instance, on my mirrorless, or if I were using a digital SLR, I would move that one focus point over to the eye. And then I would make sure that I had enough depth of field to get the full bird in focus if that's what I was trying to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on focus points? Okay. And then any lens is a flower photography lens, any lens. So your super wide angle lens, your 16 to 35, for instance, this is the super wide. Let me see, Suzanne, you're on the 7D?
70.
Canon
7D Mark.
7D, right?
70, sorry, yes. I
7D,
thought you said
right,
70.
right. Yeah,
Like-
one single, 7D. So yours would be, instead of the 16 to 35, because that camera has a crop sensor on it, you would be on the 10 to 22. So
Correct.
that would be your super wide. Marie, which camera are you on?
7D.
The 7D also. Okay, and you don't have the 5D, right?
No, but I also don't have the 10 to 22. I have the 16 to 30.
16 to
I think.
35, because it's a crop sensor camera, means you're a little bit narrower field of
Wider.
view.
I
Even
know,
though,
I want to buy the 10 to 22.
yeah.
I
the
think
10
that's so much better for me.
the 10 to 22 for super wide. Now, on the other hand, the 16 to 35 is a better quality lens. And
It
so
is.
if you use it on a 5D, for instance, or you use it if you go to mirrorless, talk to the Rs, then you've got yourself a better quality lens.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Carol,
That's
which
nice.
camera are you using now?
I'm using the Olympus mirrorless.
Okay. Okay. And so that's like a 7mm on yours, right?
I do have the 7. I rarely use it.
Yeah.
That thing is heavy.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's heavy.
Yeah, it's almost a fisheye.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
So it's too wide.
it is too wide, and
Uh-huh.
usually I have to make a decision about which lenses I'm carrying, and that one gets left
Okay. Okay.
behind.
Okay.
But the crop factor is ×2. So
Yeah. 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 So that puts you at 14mm, which is interesting because in Canon, we have the 16, the 15, and the 14. And the 16 is like perfect, but then the 15 gets a little wider and the 14 gets a little wider, which is okay for sky photography, but sometimes it's just a little bit too wide. So just a millimeter or so, but sometimes it's just a little too wide. Yeah. So your wides, whichever one you're using, these are where you're getting the field of view almost equivalent to if you spread your arms straight out from you. So if you spread your arms straight out from you, but you bring them in just a little bit, so not totally parallel with your body, but just a slight bit in, then that's what your super wide angle lenses give you. So these are good for doing things like the whole garden or, you know, the whole expanse. So that 16 to 35, that 10 to 22, the yours would be your 14, Carol, right? Or yours would be, no, yours, which one do you have? What's your super wide, Carol?
It's the seven to, okay, I don't even ever use it. so-
Yeah, 7 to whatever. Okay.
Mhm.
So you don't have anything a little narrower than that in the super wides.
I'd have to look.
That's okay. That's
Yeah,
okay.
it's 7 to like 14, and then I think I have something that starts at around 14. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. So you've got your super wide, that's the 7. And then once you get to the 14, then that's where you're getting to your medium wide angle lens. Yeah. And then you've got your medium wide angle lens. So in full frame Canons and Nikons, this would be your 24 to 105. This is on the professional level lens. Carol, that would be your 14 on yours. And then Marie, you've got the 24 to 105.
No, I have the 100 to 400.
100 to 400. Suzanne, which one do you have?
I just have the wide angle or then the 100 to 400 as well.
Okay. And then the 18.
18 to 135.
18 to 135, exactly. So the 24 to 105 or the 18 to 135, this is where if you bring your arms at a kind of a, about a, 25-degree angle from your body. Or if you moved your head just slightly as opposed to all the way to each shoulder. So if you move your head just slightly, that's the field of view that you get with the 24 to 105, the 18 to 35. Marie and Suzanne, on your cameras, the equivalent would be the 15 to 85 millimeter lens. This to me is just kind of a really good walk around lens, everyday lens, has enough zoom so that you can zoom in on things, but enough wide angle so that you can wide angle out just a little bit. It gives you a nice room view. So if you were doing like a room inside a building or room inside of a house, it fills up that room view very well. To me, this is a really nice flower lens. Once again, range of flower lens, most of the time these focus to about 9 inches. And that means that we can get close enough to a bloom. But if it's a big bloom, we can get that whole bloom in the frame. But if it's a smaller bloom, we can zoom in and get the details of that smaller bloom. And then we've got the medium telephotos like the 70 to 300s or the 70 to 200s. And these are nice for the little creatures in the garden or getting into flower blooms that maybe we can't step into the mulch to get to, or maybe a bloom that's a little bit further away. So the 75 to 300 or the 70 to 200, these are nice for that type of stuff. The 70 to 200s, so Carol, this one for you, if we're doubling it, this would be your, Carol, right? This would be your 35 to 100, right?
right.
Yeah. The nice thing about these lenses, especially if you're buying the primes, not the 2.8 because it's pretty heavy, but if you're buying the prime like the 4, the nice thing about this lens is that it's fairly lightweight. And then if it's a prime lens, it ends up giving you a better blown out background in the back. So it gives you a better bokeh. So the bokeh is the quality of this blown out background back here. And this is something we're going to test when you test all of your lenses, because we're buying lenses for flower photography many times because they have a beautiful bokeh. Because all lenses will blow out the background. All lenses will blur the background, but the quality of the blur is a whole nother story. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So lenses, questions?
Just that I have that 80 and I was thinking of returning it because it's a single, it's a single one. It's just 80. and it's heavy. I
Yeah,
was thinking of replacing it, maybe for my 7D, maybe getting the 700, 200.
you know, personally, I like the 70 to 200 more. I have the 85, the equivalent of what you're talking about, and it sits in the closet. It is
Right.
not my favorite lens because I tend to zoom.
Right.
Um,
And
Carol,
been
you have
sitting-
you have an opinion on a fixed versus a zoom?
I use the zoom except for my macro lens, right?
Mhm.
But the zoom, it gives me more options. And because the older I get, it's less that I have to carry.
Yeah,
Right.
Um,
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you have to, well, I think you have to weigh, right? The quality kind of thing, because primes typically, I think, have better quality, and your zooms at either end, you know, typically aren't as sharp, but
You know what it is? I guess for me, I agree with that. And that's probably why I bought it. But because it sits in the closet, what's the point, right? I mean,
yeah.
Mhm.
If I were a
Right.
portrait photographer, if I were doing people portraits, I would
Mhm.
probably have lots of primes.
right.
Because
Right.
you would have the stool in the same spot and the lighting
That's
set
right.
up.
Right.
But yet when we're shooting, you know, we need to get in and we need to get out. And sometimes we can't get to this pot. And that's what I find with the 85 is I have to move my body a lot. And
You have to go
so
walk away.
in the garden, I have to walk into the mulch versus being able just to zoom.
Mm,
And
Right.
I think with quality lenses now, also, we're getting quality zooms at both ends, where historically, I'll agree with Carol, if you were using a zoom lens, it wasn't as sharp at both ends. But I think the way that they're making lenses now, that we're not noticing that much at all.
Gotcha.
So I would own the 70 to 200 f4 before I would own the 80
Right.
or the 85.
Right.
And
Okay, thanks.
I bought it in the R because at one point that was the only lens I could get. So as they were making them and producing them and each lens was coming out, we just couldn't get everything we wanted at one time. And that's the only reason I own the 85. And I still don't use it, still sits in the closet.
Right. Yeah.
So what I want you to do in your very first homework assignment is just an exercise to see how close each one of your lenses focuses. Because we need to know this instinctually. We need to know how close we can get. So how far do we bend in there from the starting point and where it really focuses? So in many of our cameras, we go from a focus point that's orange when we're out of focus to a focus point that's blue when we're in focus, or it changes colors for us on the cameras so that we know that we're in focus. And so what I want you to do in your very first assignment is you're going to use every lens you own. You're going to pull them all out, every lens that you own, whether you use it or not. And you're going to photograph the same flower over and over and over again, getting as close as you possibly can. And we'll talk about this more as we get into your assignments. But for me, it always helps to know how close this lens can focus. Getting close to a bird, getting close to a flower, getting close to a person, getting close to my cat. How close can I get and focus still and have it lock on focus? And many times this is much closer than you think. So a lot of our lenses now are down into the 9 inches. That's another thing that's a slight bit different than the old days of using a macro lens. In the old film days, and even the beginning of digital in 2002 and 3, macro lenses were the only lenses that focused close, meaning about 9 inches. But now almost all the lenses focus to 9 inches. And so where we used to have a macro lens so that we could get close, the reality is almost every single one of them focuses close to this today. And so that means, once again, that we're kind of moving away from the need to have a macro lens so we can get close. Now, what is different with a macro lens is that a macro lens is ground different. The glass is ground in a different way so that we don't have any fall off in focus on the edges, because macro lenses were originally designed to photograph documents and artwork. So we put them in a copy stand, we looked straight, the camera looked straight down, and we photographed X-rays and artwork and manuscripts and documents. So that's what a macro lens was designed for. Then we found out we could use it really well for faces because it didn't distort the face. And we found out that we could use it really well for nature. And so then it moved into portrait photography and nature photography. So the difference, one of the differences with the macro lens is that we get that edge-to-edge sharpness. But the big difference is that most of our lenses now focus to the same closeness that macro lens used to do. And so I want you to take each one of your lenses and focus as close as you possibly can and figure out what your minimum focusing distance is on each one of your lenses. So then you have it in your head all the time. You kind of instinctually know how close you can get when you need to. Questions on lenses before I leave lenses? And obviously everybody who's got a large telephoto, 100 to 400, 100 to 500, all of y'all who've got large telephotos, you know that those are going to focus a little bit further away. So we got a little bit more distance on those. So
Kathy,
yeah,
I'm assuming take the extender off, of course.
yeah, you can keep it on if you want to. You can put it on, take it off, Yeah, I like my extender. Once again, I don't
disassemble my long lens at all. So
That's
I'm
right.
just
That's right. It just stays
it's
that
always
way.
ready for birds. So
Yeah, that's how mine is. It just kind of stays that way. They just stay attached to each other. Yeah,
okay.
play with it, see what happens.
Okay.
So color wheel. And you may not have studied a color wheel before. You may not have studied the color wheel with any great depth. And if you have, it's good to always go back to it. So we have our color wheel, like I'm showing you right here. And people always in a photograph look at the lightest area of the frame first. So when you're designing your photograph, your whites are always going to draw the eye to them. So think about that when you're designing the photograph, because that's the place where the human eye is going to go first. So where is the white in this picture? Is it a blown out piece of background in the back? Is it a big white blob back there behind your subject? If it is, then that's where the eye is going to go. So the eye is going to go there first. And then the eye from there will go from the reds and the blues and the yellows. And so it'll go to the primary colors, the reds and the yellows and the blues. So we go to the primary colors next, those reds and yellows and blues. So once again, if there's an area in the back of the photograph that's a blown out piece of red, then the eye's going to go back there first, as opposed to looking at the place in the photograph where you want them to look. So we have to figure out where these primary colors are going to go in our photograph, and are they going to add the photo to the photograph, or are they going to distract from the photograph? So our reds and our yellows and our blues. And then our eyes go to the secondary colors, and these are the combinations. So the oranges and the greens and the violets. Now, what happens with the color wheel is that when red and yellow are added together, we get orange. You all know that. And when yellow and blue are added together, we get green. You all know that. And when blue and yellow are added together, then we get violet. And then when we add a little bit more yellow, then we get this color up here. And down here, when we add a little bit more yellow to violet, we get a red violet or we get a blue violet. So as we add a little bit more of the corresponding color, then we get a different shade. As we add white toward the center, we get lighter colors. And as we go more toward the center, this is what happens if we add gray. And then as we add more black, these are the deep colors that we get in here. So around the exterior, what we end up having are just the primary colors, the reds and the yellows and the blues, and then the mixtures of them, mixing a lot or mixing a little. And then as we go into the center, we're adding white, and then we're adding gray, and then we're adding black. So these going down into here are the tints and the shades, as they're called. So the shades down here and the tints up here. So the color wheel, as we're designing our photographs, because you're going to take a flower that you like, and now you're going to have to put it against a background. So you look on the color wheel, find your color for your flower, and then your background is directly opposite it, or your background might be in a triangular form from that. So this color wheel will show you what your background is going to be and what color your background should be. This is where, when we're designing our photographs, we need to make sure that we keep that color harmony. Same thing for macro. So we have this really cool little piece of glass that we want to photograph. Now, what color background do we put it on? We put it on a color background based on what the color wheel tells us. So the color wheel for us designing a photograph is exactly like the color wheel would be for you designing a living room. We're going to make sure that we have all the colors in harmony, or designing an outfit that you might wear. That was one of my things I hated the most about going into the office every day, all those 25 something years ago, is I had to make sure that I was in color harmony with my outfits. And that just drove me crazy, because I can do this with photography, but I cannot do this with clothes. Much, much easier staying home now, you know. So it's the same thing that we do in our everyday life with our color harmony, but now we're doing it when we're designing our photographs. When we're out in the field, we see a flower that we like at the botanic garden, or we see a flower that we like as a wildflower. Now, what background do we need to put with it? What happens if it's against a background that's going to clash? Then that tells us that this just isn't going to work. And so we need to think about that color wheel when we're designing our photographs, either artificially designing our photographs like we're going to do now, since we're taking a flower class in the middle of winter, or when we're actually out in the wild and photographing. So questions on the color wheel, or any things you all have learned over the years about the color wheel?
So if I understand what you're saying, if the flower is a violet color, you're wanting yellow in your background?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yellow in your background, or because we're going triangular, it might be orange or it might be green. But ideal would be yellow. That's the easiest.
Okay.
Anything else that you've learned about the color wheel over the years? It's a fun thing to share.
Never used it.
Never used it?
Well, I
Very
think what's
helpful.
interesting, oh, sorry. I think
Go.
what's interesting is how often the complementary color combinations are in nature, just
Mhm.
by design.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, it is absolutely amazing. And, you know, we see this in bird feathers all the time, and that we end up getting that complementary color. Rarely do we get a color clash in nature. And I think that's pretty neat, the way it works. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, so we've got purples here, but we've also got whites in the background, and we've got reds in the background. So what's going to happen?
Your eye is going to go to the yellow in the background.
Mm-hmm. And the
Okay.
red. and the
And the
white.
white, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Which means that if you think about it, you're not coming back over to my in focus tulip very often.
That's true.
And then your eyes getting drawn all over the place. And so then you're having to come back to my in focus tulip. And as a result, it just isn't fun to look at this photograph. Or it's not going to be one that you would want to put on your wall because of where the other colors are in it. And visually, walking through the garden, it's absolutely beautiful. But as a photograph, it's got problems. So when we're looking through the viewfinder, we need to think about what's in there and think about, is this the best way to design this photograph? Because it's not going to work in the end. So playing around with it. So we need to think about that color harmony. And then I'm going to throw a ton of gadgets at you because there's lots of stuff that's fun to play with. And you might already own some of these, or this might give you a good excuse to order them on Amazon or whoever you need to order from. So reflector, 5-in-1 reflector. How many of y'all have one?
I have a reflector, but it's very big.
It's very big.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. If you have too big a one, once again, that would have been good for studio. Mine's about
Right.
24 inches. And the one I have is a 5-in-1 reflector. Carol, this what you have?
I have one of those, and I have a really, really small one
Uh-huh.
that stays in my camera bag, but it's only got 2 colors, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Now this folds up to about this big. So it stays in one of the little pouches of my camera bag, just gets flat. And so I don't, I use it when I need to use it. But the beautiful thing about the 5-in-1 reflector is it's got silver on one side, gold on the other side. And then it's
That's
got a
not bad.
diffusion panel in the middle. So this is where we can put it between the sun and the flower to get rid of the shadow. Now this shadow right here, you probably didn't notice it right at the first, but if you get rid of it, then you really notice it. So it's when you get rid of that flower, that shadow, that you realize, oh yeah, that made a big difference in getting rid of that shadow. So
Is it in front? Is it in front, the reflector right now?
the reflector right now, this is a diffuser, I suspect, and it's between the sun and the flower.
Okay.
So so kind of up in this direction from where the sun would be. Yeah, trying to cut that shadow as much as possible. So
Gotcha.
these little 5-in-1 reflectors, the one I have, once again, is about 24 inches. And then you can get them about 8 inches as well. You can get them in a little smaller size, depending on which one you want. And they're nice because once again, like $29, you've got one of these, and then you've always got one from there on. How big is yours, Marie? Do you have any idea?
I don't even think I used it. It's pretty big though. They were telling us to get ones like this when we were in class.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
but she was a dance, she did a lot of dance,
Mhm.
street dancing and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I think that's why.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is what you would need if you were, once again, studio work or doing people
Studio.
work. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the 5-in-1 reflector has silver on one side and gold on the other side. And we can use silver when we want a more white color, and we can use gold when we want more of a golden color. And this is once again where we got to watch out just a little bit. Just because we have it doesn't mean we want to use it. So on this torch cactus, it has a magenta flower, but by using the gold reflector, I'm adding yellow to the color cast, where if I would have used white, I would have kept the magenta color. So it might look cool when we see it because the reflector adds such a beautiful color to such a beautiful light to the photograph. But by adding the wrong color, it kind of makes things look not quite right with the photograph. Now, I want to show you an example of how we would use this reflector. So this is a whole series of photographs, and obviously a cactus out in Big Bend National Park. We've got really harsh sunlight going on here. And so I'm just going to show you the various ways that we would use the reflector. So here's the gold reflector, and watch the tunas, the fruit up on top. So when we add the gold reflector, we get a little bit of light on those tunas at top. So now you can see the gold. And then the diffuser now softens that shadow that we had on the right-hand side. So that's the diffuser. And then if we get close so that we can see this in a bit more detail. So here's the gold reflector over on the side. So this is what we started with. And now we've got gold on the left-hand side, but we still got that harsh shadow on the right-hand side. So now we add the reflector to the right-hand side. So now we've got rid of the shadow on the right-hand side. We've added a little bit of gold to the left-hand side. And then if I take the gold away, but leave the diffuser, now this is what I've got. And then move the diffuser just a little bit. The gold reflector in a slightly different angle, still using the diffuser, and then moving that reflector on the left-hand side to another slightly different angle. And now using the silver to bring in more light and changing the angle.
With the gold or without? Or with the gold?
You can only use silver or gold. You can't use them at
Right.
the same time. Yeah. So this is the
Gotcha.
silver. And then this is the gold with the diffuser. So we're dealing now with very subtle changes in the color of the light. So going back on all those to where we started there. So you see how they're used. And I want to emphasize in all of these also that the reflector and the diffuser are close. The closer they are, the more intense they are. The further away they are, the less intense they are. So this reflector, this diffuser over on the sunshiny side is almost touching the cactus. And as we get it closer and closer, it gives us more of a glow to it. So just moving them in and out and changing how intense they are. This one's so bright, so it's probably pretty close as opposed to right there on the left-hand side. So just
Kathy,
playing around.
are these sitting up on them? Like, are these just, how do you have these and take the picture?
I've got a helper who's holding, or they're leaning against something. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's what I'll have to do, figure out how to lean them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Or have an assistant or somebody to help you out.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, drag my mother out.
Yeah, exactly. Get somebody to hold them. Yeah.
All
Now,
right.
with those big ones, when I see people doing the portrait photography outside in the springtime with those big reflectors, they've definitely got somebody with them because of the wind.
We did it by a window. The window, like on the 7th floor of a building, had beautiful light coming in, but it wasn't enough. And then we used, I guess we used the silver.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden the faces lit up.
Yeah.
I just don't remember using a diffuser with it.
Yeah.
I don't have a diffuser. but
So
I
the
will
diffuser
get
is
one.
inside. It's in the middle. That's that big,
Oh.
huge white thing that's in the middle. That's what that's for.
So you pull it out and, oh, I see.
Mhm.
All
Mhm.
right, so I
Yeah.
better look at it.
Yeah. And then that would have gone between the window and the subject to cut any shadows that were coming through that window and causing them on the subject.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Those diffusers are nice. So the good thing about these 5-in-1 reflectors is that you've got your gold, your silver, your diffuser, and then you've got your black, which takes away light. So in the event that there's too much light, you can put that black to make the light block. So it's handy gadget. I don't use the black that much, but I do use the diffuser and I do use the different colors. And then some other cool gadgets, and these are all on your handout, by the way. So I've given you, your handout's fairly long because it's got a whole bunch of different pieces of equipment that are attached to the back of it. But these are all the different, what are called Wimberley clamps, PLAMPS, plant clamps. But what we've got are different things that we would use in taking pictures of the garden. So I've got the camera on the tripod, this little bracket right underneath here. You all can see my cursor, can't you? Okay, so this little bracket right here is a bracket that hooks onto the bottom of the camera and it holds the flash. And it has different little articulating arms so that I can move the flash wherever I need it to go. And then hooking the flash and then using a cord. These are really handy. So if you don't have one, they're really handy for being able to use those. So using that cord. And then by the way, a nice little coiled cord is all you need versus a big long single cord. So I think this is like a 9-inch coil cord, but you buy it for your camera. So it's Canon to Canon, Olympus to Olympus. And then back here in the back, Wimberley makes a clamp that has a screwdriver head on it. So you can stab it into the ground. So this is held in the ground by just stabbing it in the ground. So it's just got the end of a screwdriver on it. Very handy little gadget. And then it's got these bendable arms on it and the clamps on the front of it. And then this is a bar with a clamp on it right here. And then you can see here's the 5-in-1 reflector over here. So this is used right here. This little clamp right in here is used to pull the azalea away from a busy background to a background that's more in color harmony with what I need it to be. So instead of clipping the flower, I'm just pulling it over just a little bit to get it where I need it to be.
And what flash are you using for that?
So this is just a little bitty flash. And the only reason I'm using this is because I don't need a lot of control over it. This is a 270EX and Canon makes these little bitty flashes. I use them for hummingbird photography because they're very small, they're lightweight. I can travel with them like to Costa Rica with them for doing hummingbird photography. But you can put your regular ordinary flash on there. And this just allows you to use your regular ordinary flash. Canons, it would be your 430EX. That would be your basic ordinary flash to use.
Okay.
Beginning basic ordinary flash. And then here's the same setup, just taken from a slightly different angle. So here's the flash once again right here. You see that the reflector is held with another bracket, another clamp, and it has a really nice clamp to it, hand manipulated clamp to it. So you can put that on your tripod leg and then put the reflector where you need it to be. And what I do is I figure out where the reflector needs to be, and then I clamp it where it needs to be. So we can put that reflector right where we need to be. Here's the other clamp right here with the screwdriver in it, and it has the reticulating arm. And then here's the other little bracket right here. So, this is a whole bunch of little stuff, but these are little things that I have bought as the years have gone on. So they're just little pieces of equipment that I've added here and there. I buy these from Wimberley, and Wimberley has damaged ones on their website so that you can buy some of them that are scuffed up. And on on your handout, if you'll flip over to the back of your handout, I've given you all the little pieces back there so that each one of them, you have the model number and what it is, what it's called, what the official name is. And these aren't very much. These are running in the $15, $20 range, each one of them. And I don't think that you need to buy them all unless you just really want to. But if you look, for instance, on your handout, the Wimberley PP 200, the Plamp 2 with the extension rod attached, that's the one that has the screwdriver end to it. And then it comes with the little rod so that you can move things around. These come in really, really handy. Macro photography, garden photography. So when I'm doing things and I need that extra hand, this is what you need, is these type of things. They're really, really well made and well designed. So think about either buying one or buying two or whatever it might turn out that you might think that you need. And also think about it in terms of, as you're working on your flower photography for this class, think about it in terms of, oh, I need a hand, or I had to call somebody and ask them to hold this, or I had to tape something. Because these things are wonderful for clamping all kinds of stuff. I usually shoot, if I'm shooting inside on some sort of setup, macro setup or something like that, I usually use a card table. So up here in my office, I have a card table, and it's kind of my workspace that I work on. I've got some stuff I'm going to start working on up here in the next couple of days. And then I know where these clamps are, so I can use them in the event that I need something to be held in a specific spot. Anybody own any of these? Carol, you have any of these? No?
No, I just use twist ties and wooden stakes, but this is
Okay.
awesome.
Twist ties and wooden stakes works really well. Yeah. And once again, these things don't take up much space. So you curl them up, you throw them in the camera bag. I'm not going to carry these with me all the time. I have them in a plastic tote in the storage, in the closet. But they're there when I need them. And that's the good thing about them. Questions on these? No? Okay. And then here's another thing that I just absolutely love. Now, these are called extension tubes and close-up filters. Carol, have you bought these over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have these now?
Yes, I have two.
Okay. Okay. Now, what these do is the extension tubes over on the right-hand side allow you to get closer. So if your lens focused to 9 inches, if you use the small tube, then your lens could now focus to 4.5 inches. And if you used the bigger tube, then your lens could now focus to about 2 inches. Use both tubes together and your lens can now sit in the middle of the flower. Now, once you add these, you have almost no depth of field. So you're on a tripod, even though if you use the small tube, you can handhold that. And this is really a neat way to do macro photography without a macro lens. If you have a macro lens, these things fit on your macro lens, which means that you can focus closer with your macro lens. Marie and Suzanne, you all are lucky because these extension tubes fit on digital SLR cameras, and you can probably find them used. Use Canon for your Canon cameras. Carol, which ones are you using for your Olympus?
So I think I may be getting confused between teleconverters and extension tubes.
Okay, these are
Yeah,
extension tubes.
Yeah, I have the teleconverters. Not
You have the
extension tubes.
teleconverters. Okay,
Yeah.
these are extension tubes. Yeah, so these are different. Teleconverters add more magnification. So a 100 lens becomes a 200 millimeter lens, but they still focus the same distance. Extension tubes allow you to focus closer. So these extension tubes are really, really neat for being able to focus closer with your cameras. They don't make these yet for our cameras. So Lynette, we don't have them yet for mirrorless. I'm sure they'll be coming soon. Now we could use the extension tube and then the adapter and then put our lens on, but that kind of defeats the purpose there. Marie, you ask a question?
Yeah, I was wondering what you would put this on top of, because like I don't have a macro lens.
Doesn't matter. It fits any lens.
Okay, so is there really a need for a macro lens if you have something like this?
Correct. No, there's not. Unless you're simply going for the construction of the lens.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Would you put something like this on top of a macro lens? No, right?
Yeah, because
Oh,
a macro
good.
lens only focuses to 9 inches and I want to get closer. So this now lets me get to 4.5 inches.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Now the close-up filter, on the other hand, this is the Canon 77 millimeter because the opening of my lens is 77 millimeters. And it's a close-up lens 500D. When I put this on the front of the lens, instead of the lens focusing to 9 inches, it'll also now go to about 4.5 inches. So this is like putting a giant, huge magnifying glass on the front of your lens, except it's optically corrected all the way around so you don't get any curve toward the edges of the lens, and it's optically coated. Now, in the old days, film days, so film days now are almost 20 years ago, we used these Canon 77Ds or 500Ds, and the Nikon had the 4T, 5T, and 6T. So everybody had one of these, and this is how we got super close to our subjects. Then Nikon quit making theirs, so Canon were the only ones. But the 77 millimeter threads fit any lens at 77 millimeters. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Olympus, Canon, Nikon, or Sony. This still fits a 77 millimeter lens. Then Canon, during the tsunami in Japan, lost one of their factories, and it's where they made close-up filters. So we didn't have close-up filters for a long time. These are called filters, even though it says lens on it. So we didn't have these for a long time. So there are other companies out there that are making these. But then lo and behold, about 2 years ago, somebody out of Japan started selling brand new in the box Canon 500D close-up lenses. I think they got a storage shed in Japan after the tsunami, and these were okay, and that's how they're selling them. So these are very heavy, pretty expensive. So they'll run you about maybe $250, even though I think they're a little bit less than this now. But any one of these close-up lenses for the millimeters of your lens is a wonderful gadget to have. And once again, it sits flat, it can stay in your camera bag, and you can use it wherever you want to. So all the Canon professional level lenses, for instance, are 77 millimeters. So this means I can screw this close-up lens on the front of my 100 to 500. I can screw it on my 85 millimeter macro. I can screw it on my 24 to 105. I can screw it on my wide angle lens. So the wonderful thing about having a universal millimeter for your lenses is that you can buy something like this. And then also there are other brands, and I will make myself a note to send you all the brand names of the other companies that are making these, because I'd see that they're not on my handout. Because there are other companies that are now making these, and on my blog, I have tested them, and I don't see any difference between the Nikons, Canons, and the off brands. So if you really want to get crazy, you can put extension tubes on the back of your lens to get close. And then you can put the close-up filter on the front of your lens. And now you're setting your lens inside the heart of a flower.
Gotcha.
Tripod, obviously, and no depth of field, but the view is beautiful. So when we've used these on workshops, when I hear people behind their camera gasp, that's because I know that they have now seen the view. So these are cool. So if you can find extension tubes, Marie and Suzanne, you all would buy the Canon extension tubes, and I bet you can find some used ones out there. And then Lynette, we don't have these yet for the Canon R cameras, but you could use the close-up filters, and all of you all could use the close-up filter no matter what brand that you find. Now, be aware, there are super cheap close-up filters out there. They usually come in sets of 3, and they have the edges on them are super blurry because they're not edge-to-edge sharpness. So you can buy a set of close-up filters for $39, but they're just garbage. So if you're going to invest in one, invest in a good one. If you need me to double check before you buy it, send me the link and I'll tell you whether I agree with you that it's a good one or not.
Can you use that on birds? Would you get?
No, you wouldn't
closer
use
in
it on birds,
No,
but
it
where
would
you
be-
use the extension tubes on birds is sometimes when I've been in a blind and the perches are too close for my lens, you can put an extension tube on the back and now the lens will focus closer.
You put it in front of the converter or at the back of the converter?
Either
Or-
one, you can do either one. Mhm.
Oh,
I put it behind the converter against the camera.
okay.
Yeah. So once again, it's just this tool. Kind of sits in your closet most of the time, but when you need it, it's there. So it's a handy gadget to have. Yeah. So here's an example. It's a peony with backlighting from a window. So it's just a peony positioned in front of a window. So we get some backlighting using a reflector in the front to add some light to the front. And then this is a lens, and I've added the extension tube to the back and a close-up filter to the front. And then just put it right inside the peony. And then here's another example, putting it right inside an iris and using a reflector to light up. Because once you get the lens that close, you get a bit of a reflection or a bit of a shadow on the flower. And then here's another flower, extension tube on this one. Or no, this is just a close-up, I suspect. And then here's just to kind of give you an example of this, of how it works. So this is my 16 to 35 millimeter lens. Now remember, this is my wide angle lens. So this is my super wide angle. I would use this for landscapes. It focuses to 11 inches normally. And this is just a Phlox. And I've added a 12 millimeter extension tube to the back of it. And now it focuses even closer. So instead of focusing 11 inches, it now focuses about this far. Same Phlox with the 12 millimeter extension tube on the back, focusing this close. And now I added the close-up filter to the front, and now I can get even closer.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then here's just the plane. So this is what it looks like, just plain. Here's what it looks like with the extension tube on the back to let me get closer with that wide angle lens and the close-up filter on the front. And then here's what it looks like with just the close-up or with just the extension tube. So you can add these to wide angle lenses, you can add them to telephoto lenses, and that's the beautiful thing about this. So a nice way to get close. Carol.
Sorry, I was muted.
That's-
So I know when you put a teleconverter on, you lose a stop.
Uh-huh.
Do extension tubes affect that at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Nope. No, so you're not losing any stops. And Carol's on mirrorless, Lynette's on mirrorless, and I'm on mirrorless. There's a company out there called Kenko, Kenko, and they make extension tubes. I've never really liked them that much, but Nikon didn't have extension tubes for years, so it was the only ones that Nikon users could use. So we might be able to find for mirrorless the extension tubes. But if we can't find that, then we've got the close-up filter at least. And I think why we can't get them for mirrorless is because there's so little distance between the sensor and the front of the camera. But it's worth trying anyway. It's worth looking. But I'm still on my mirrorless camera, I'm using that close-up filter on the front a lot. So it just screws on the front of the lens. And then we've got lens babies out there. And there are lots of people out there using lens babies. And lens baby, anybody have one? Carol, you have one?
I had it for my Canon system, but I sold it when I sold all my Canon.
Okay, so what'd you think when you had it for your Canon system?
I loved it, but that had to be what I was doing when I was shooting. I mean, I took it with me to Virginia and I said, I'm going to make myself do these things, but I didn't like the way it did any of my landscape kinds or wide angle stuff. So, but the close-ups, I loved it.
That's a good assessment. That's pretty much my assessment of it. I've owned the Velvet lens baby and used it and then sent it back. And I didn't use the suite.
Yeah, some of it I looked at it and I thought I can do this in post-processing.
Exactly. That was kind of how I thought. Now, what the lens babies do, you can go to their website and look at it if you want to, but they're these little kind of plastic lenses that do weird, goofy things. They distort, they make it look like you're looking through fog, they make it look like you're looking through haze. So lens babies create these kind of views. I agree with Carol. I always feel like I can do this in post-processing. And then once again, I'm owning a lens that only does one thing. And that means most of the time it's going to sit on the shelf. And to me, that's kind of a worthless lens. But if you go and you look at some pictures from people who are using lens babies, Jamie Davidson, for instance, uses a lot of lens babies. There's a lot of people out there who are using the lens babies and doing phenomenal work with them. But as I said, I bought it, I owned it, I owned the Velvet because everybody said this is what you needed to use. And then I found that I just wasn't using it. So I sent it back. If I'm not mistaken, they also are not autofocus. And so that means we're manually focusing. Is that right, Carol?
I think so. Yeah, I think if you're a fine art photographer, it might be a good tool.
And if you're photographing only one thing with a kind of portfolio that all looks the same, I think it's not bad. But I just find I can throw a texture on or I can blur, in post-processing and get it exactly like I want it.
Yeah, and then you have the option of not having that effect on the photo too.
Correct. So anyway, they're out there. Look at it. If you fall in love with it, want to invest in it, then it's kind of once again, kind of an interesting thing to have out there. Questions on these?
I thought they were kind of expensive too for something that's not used a lot.
They were, weren't they? They were like $300 and something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where the close-up filter at 250, I think you're going to use that more than you would end up using one of these. And once again, we can do a lot of stuff post-processing, and some of these lens babies give you this kind of dreamy look. Well, you can put a piece of lace in front of your lens and get that same dreamy look. You can put a UV filter on with a little bit of Vaseline on it and get that same look. So there's some looks that you can get without having to invest in another piece of equipment. Okay, questions on those before I leave them? No? Okay. So in your homework assignment, what I want you to do is I want you to get as close as you can with each one of the lenses that you own. So get as close as you can with each one of the lenses that you own. If that's 5 lenses, do 5 lenses. If that's 4 lenses, do 4 lenses. If you've got that lens sitting in the closet, then bring that lens out of the closet and see what you can do with it. But I want you to get as close as you can, and I want you to photograph the same flower with each lens that you own. And I want you to focus as close as you possibly can. So get as close as you can with each one of the lenses that you own and photograph the same flower. And if you want to do f4.0 and f22 for your own knowledge of what kind of blown out background you get, then go ahead and do that, because this is a chance also to test the bokeh on your lens. So get as close as you can to your flower with your 18 to 135. Focus, do it at 4.0 and do it at 22, and then zoom to the 135 and do it again at 4 and do it again at 22 if you want to. So push your lenses, see what your lenses do, see what this inventory of lenses that you own does. Make sense?
So that would mean that one picture could be like the whole flower and the next one could be just like the center of the flower, because you've
got
that
it.
much space.
Exactly, exactly. And then try that, if you're zooming, try that at both f-stops, a 4 f-stop and a 22 f-stop. Let's test those lenses and see what they do. This is a good chance for you to see the bokeh on your lens, the quality of the blown out background. And then I want you to recreate a famous or a picture you like of a floral display. So I want to show you what some students did in the past. So I want you to pick a painting that you like of a floral display, and I want you to try to recreate it. So this is a Georgia O'Keeffe of magnolia blooms. Now notice, she's got the gold back here and the blue here. So the primary blue is in front, but a secondary, a gold is in back, but it's not as bright as the first color. So the color in front is the brighter, where the color behind is the more subdued. And then we've got the green and the blue and the yellow. So notice how we're playing around that color wheel, what Georgia O'Keeffe did. And then we're playing with the extent of the light right here. I think she was really bold to do that white right here. But yet it's all pulling in a diagonal, and to me it all works. So I can see that. It's interesting. I judge a lot of photo contests, and I can see that getting nicked by a judge saying, I wish that wasn't right there. But she did it, and she did it intentionally, and it's there and it works. But then this is what one of my students did with this picture. So she took the magnolia bloom and then tried to do the same lighting that she saw in the Georgia O'Keeffe. So I want you to recreate, find that picture that you like of flowers, and then I want you to recreate it as best you can. So I thought she did a fabulous job. I think it looks really, really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, ready.
And then here's one of the Van Gogh sunflowers. And you've probably all seen this before. And then here is what Terry did for one of our classes.
Oh, wow.
Very nice.
Very
Yeah.
nice. So here's what she started with, and here's what she created.
Wow.
Now, to wilt the sunflowers, she microwaved them
Ugh.
That's great.
because she could only find nice,
Fresh ones.
pretty sunflowers. So she microwaved them.
Ah,
And then the color in the background, the blue, and go back to Van Gogh's picture, see the blue. So he's
Yeah.
using that blue and that yellow and that green again, that color harmony. And she went all over her house, and this is her bath mat.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she just took that blue from the Van Gogh and went all over her house looking for anything that was that color of blue. So I'm not going to say this is going to be easy, but I want you to put the same thought process into it that you see what Terry did and what Laura did in trying to recreate it. So find a picture that you like and then recreating it. Looking at the color harmony, looking at the composition, and obviously what flowers you can find in January.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Okay. Questions on your homework?
How do we submit the photo?
How do you submit them to us? I will send you a link to my Dropbox.
Okay.
And so tomorrow I'll send you a link to my Dropbox, and I'll put a folder in there. I think Susanna Marie and Lynette, you all have used this before.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for you, if you have a WeTransfer or you have a Dropbox and you want to send me a link, do whatever works for you. So if you're already used to sending pictures by WeTransfer or Dropbox or whatever, then feel free to send it to me that way. You are going to resize your pictures to PowerPoint size, which is 1024 on the longest side by 96.
Okay.
So you're going to do 1024 on the longest side, resize, and by 96 DPI. So not 96 pixels per inch or DPI, PPI or DPI. Those should be small enough to email me if you need to. So if it turns out that you need to just email them to me, then feel free to email them to me. And if you
Okay.
could have them to me by Sunday afternoon, then, or before, then I can put them into the slideshow, and that way we can look at them and talk about them.
Great.
Okay, questions?
Just one quick question on the first homework. Putting the camera on a tripod, again, just getting the tripod even as close to the flower as we can get and still keep it focused, right?
Yeah.
And then once the tripod's there, do you really want us to keep the tripod in the same spot? And then,
Yeah, let's keep everything as consistent as
yeah,
possible.
okay.
Unless when you zoomed in, you found that didn't make a composition that was worthwhile anymore, and you need to change it in that respect.
Okay.
Yeah, still try to work on a halfway decent photograph versus just a random. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might find it's easier to move the flower than to move the tripod.
Sometimes we get stupid
Yeah,
and we're like, how do I do this? And the obvious thing doesn't come to mind.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. That's right.
Just
So,
like me.
yeah.
What
Yeah.
information would you need then? Do you need just the aperture 4.5 or aperture 22? what else would you want? You don't need the pictures on those, do you? Or do
No,
you?
but when you rename your photograph, if you want to rename it Lynette 24 millimeters f4, that helps me a lot.
Okay,
So you want, for the first part, you want submissions from those as well?
Mhm.
Okay,
photographs, Kathy, or just the information?
No,
as
your
you want?
photographs. I want to see your
The photo-
photographs. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
To
Because
the
this helps.
closest focus and to the farthest close. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
As close as you can focus on each one of the lenses you own, and then just changing your f-stops from the very bottom to the very top.
Okay.
And would we be in manual mode?
You can be in whatever mode you'd like. If manual mode is the easiest for you to do that, that's okay.
Okay.
And this is a good chance also for you all to see other lenses that are on the market and go, oh, wow, that's got a much better bokeh than what my lens has got. Because not every blown out fuzzy background is the same.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing you all next week, see what you create. And I'm here, I've got a workshop at the end of the week, but I'm here, I'm accessible by email. And so in the event that you end up with a problem or you're totally stuck, either send me an email and I'll see if I can help you out, okay?
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Okay, I will see you all next week and I will share the recording with you when I get it. So it should be processed sometime later this afternoon. And when I send that, I'll also send the link to my Dropbox and I'll send the link to next week's class as well.
Okay. Kathy, I do have one question. It's
Sure, go ahead.
not about flowers at all. It's about some of I know you do a lot of workshops. Have you ever done the Blue Ridge Mountains?
I haven't done the Blue Ridge Mountains. And, you know, I have friends that do classes up there and workshops up there. And a lot of times I don't want to tread on one of my colleagues' territory.
Gotcha.
Like I don't want them to come to Big Bend if they don't know Big Bend. That's mine. You
Right.
know? So, you know, and it's the same thing with some different parts of the country. I have friends who do North Carolina a lot, and that's their territory. They know that inside and out. Yeah. But I
Is
do
my
like
friend
the,
Yeah, my friend just moved to North Carolina and he's a photographer, much more experienced than I am. And he just did the Blue Ridge Mountains and during, I guess the harvest moon or
Mhm.
whatever. And it was sick. It
yeah.
was sick.
Yeah, yeah. Look at Kevin Adams photography. Kevin Adams is the state nature photographer for North Carolina, also a really good friend of mine. And he, in his business, we kind of started our businesses about the same time in the mid-90s. He decided he would stay in North Carolina, and that's what he works on. That's his, his territory. And I have to really hand it to him because that's where he photographs. Yeah.
I wonder if my friend Lou knows him. I'd love to send you his photo.
Yeah. Yeah. Send me a
It's-
link. I always like looking at good photos. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You are welcome. Anything else from anybody else? No? Okay. Good weather. Don't get too cold up there, Marie. Hopefully down
Oh,
here, we're doing okay. My daffodils, by the way, are beginning to bloom. So next week I should have blooming daffodils in my yard.
That's great.
We'll see.
I'm just thinking of putting my tulips in the pot because it's the last time to put them in the pot.
Yes, it is. I
The
put
middle of
mine in
the-
the pot
Right.
2 weeks ago, and then I put some more in the pots yesterday. So yes, my tulips they're the tulips from 2 weeks ago are coming up.
Wow.
So it is time.
Yes. That's what I'm doing today.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do today. Yeah, because it's halfway warm out there. We can go outside today, Marie. It's warm.
And the sun is
Someone
shining.
there.
Yeah,
Oh, lucky.
sort of warm anyway. Sort of warm. We'll see. Okay, ladies, thank you very much. I loved having you.
Thank
I will
you.
see you next week.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.